Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Real, Raw, and Honest. I'm so grateful that you are here today. Before we get started, I want to encourage you to subscribe, to share, to leave a comment, to like. All of those things do make a difference, so I appreciate each and every one of you. On the other side of that, I want to say welcome to 2026. I can't believe that we're actually in 2026. It seems like only yesterday it was January 2025. And here we are starting a brand new year with hopes and dreams and plans and beliefs that God is going to do great and amazing things in us and through us in this year. And so I want to talk to you today about health anxiety. I want to talk to you about some of the things that make us nervous, some of the things that give us anxiety, some of the things that, we don't need to necessarily hang on to, but the things that God wants to remove from our life and heal us from. So, it's January, and maybe this is why I'm thinking about doing this now, because here we are, it's January, and how many places can you go right now where somebody doesn't have a mask on, or there's somebody that's avoiding people because they're afraid that you might be carrying something that they might get, or that they might pass on to somebody that they love. And I'm not making light of any of that, don't get me wrong. When my first husband had acute myeloid leukemia, we had to be careful of all those things all the time because he just didn't have what it took to be able to fight those things. And so we had to be aware, we had to pay attention. And so we did. And he was made to wear a mask when he went out, and he didn't like it, but he did it. And I did it, even though I didn't like it. And then we have the whole COVID thing. But let's just take a look. This is the time of year when people are nervous about going to the store. This is the time of year when people are concerned about going on a vacation, or going to a large gathering. They don't want to be sick, they don't want to get sick, and they don't want to pass sickness on. And there's a lot of reasons why people can feel that way. You can have a fear of getting the flu, right? You could be afraid of, and especially as you age, people could be afraid of getting the flu because, if the flu turns into pneumonia, then they're going to be hospitalized. If they're hospitalized, are they going to come home? These are all realities of the aging process. So again, not to make light of any of this, that is not my purpose or my intention. And so these are real valid concerns that some people have, but it can grip us in such a way that it just shrinks our world. Like our world just becomes smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller because we don't want to go out. We don't want to face the fear of getting ill. And so as the Lord comes in and gives us boldness and courage and strength, then those things become easier for us to manage. Nobody likes to have the flu. And I hear that this year it's been a real kicker. I've known a few people who have had it, and they tend to have this lingering cough afterward that they have to deal with for weeks on end. And that's irritating. But nobody wants to be seriously ill. And or maybe you do get the flu, and the fear is that it's just going to continue to get worse, so you're really hyper monitoring your symptoms, right? You're hyper monitoring your fever, your ability to eat or not eat, your water intake, your all of these things. You're concerned that it's going to get worse and you're going to end up hospitalized. And maybe too, you're concerned about the fact that you're going to have to take time off of work, and as it is, you're only making enough to make your payments, and there's not a lot of money left at the end of the month, or maybe there's no money left at the end of the month. And if you have to take time off and you don't have any sick days left, well, then you're out that money. And so these are all realities. You can be a germaphobe. You could be that's somebody who's afraid of all germs. You don't want to touch anything or get anything because you're afraid it's going to make you sick. It doesn't matter what it is, you're afraid that you're going to end up ill. And these are, again, there's some famous people that you might know of that, struggle with being a germaphobe, and they don't want to shake hands. They'll do the elbow bump or whatever. And so these are real things. These are real things. And maybe you struggle with that to some degree, and maybe you don't. And one of the things we're going to do at the end of this is we're going to look at some tools so that you can step outside of that and not remain in this place of fear and anxiety around health issues. So, another area that people can really struggle with is with injuries, right? When I was first getting married the first time, I had this lovely lady. She was just so much fun to hang out with. She was older than I was quite a bit. And I told her that my first husband and I were going to be going to Disneyland for our honeymoon. And she said, "You're not going to go on a roller coaster, are you?" And I said, "Well, yeah." I said, "We're going to do the roller coasters." And she said, "Why would you tempt God like that?" And I'm like, I, it was not a thought that I'd ever considered, nor is it one that I still consider, but I just was like, well, I didn't think that going on a roller coaster was tempting God. And she was like, "I would never go on a roller coaster. You're just tempting the Lord." And I'm like, I don't think so. But that was her fear, right? Her fear was that it would break, it would fall, you would die. That was her fear, her level of fear in that area. So, but people can avoid things like extracurricular activities like sporting events, doing sporting, skating, that kind of thing, hiking, any of those things, because they're concerned that they might fall and get hurt, break a leg, break an arm, and then what? And then they have to take a certain number of period of time off in order to heal. And of course, that comes back to money, but it also can have to do with the fear, the pain, that you don't want to have pain in any way, shape, or form. And so let's not forget roller coasters. Can't do the roller coasters because the same thing might happen. The reality is these things do happen from time to time, but looking at the percentage and going, I can't let the small percentage of times that something goes wrong and somebody gets hurt to prevent me from going out and enjoying life and doing some sports and doing some fun days at Disneyland and that kind of thing. Like, these are things that we don't need to, we need to know that the percentage is relatively small on that, and then trust the Lord in order to get you through it safely. I've never had any issue, but I do have a friend who was skating one time, and she broke her ankle pretty bad, and these are things that can happen. So just know that it maybe can, but you don't need to live in that state of fear of it. Sometimes we can have a fear of an exam, a medical exam that we've taken, and we're afraid of what the results might say. And that can cause us to, sit in worry and concern until we get the results back. And, the thoughts in our mind might be, well, what if it's cancer? What if it's some other disease, something that, we don't want to experience. When my first husband ended up with acute myeloid leukemia, I was shocked. We were both shocked. It was one of those things where, like, wow, I was not expecting that as a result. It was not something that had crossed our mind that it would be cancer, right? And so there is a shock value that comes with that for sure. Absolutely. The other thing, after we get those tests done, right, we're waiting for the results, which can be anxiety inducing for sure. But then, there's also, what if it's some other horrible disease, right? Like cancer is usually one of the ones at the top. But, we often think about other things that it could be. When I was very young, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis when I was 23 or 24. And I had gone to the doctor, and he had done the tests and sent them away. And I was like, okay, I had incredible pain in my ankles, in my wrists, and my hands. And I was like the pain, it was, I'll never forget the pain. And so when he called me into the office, called me back for the test results, he just told me that I had rheumatoid arthritis and that I needed to be aware that I would probably never marry because my husband would have to take care of me always, and I would be in a wheelchair. I would never be able to have children because I wouldn't be able to take care of them. I mean, it wasn't a very positive experience for sure. And so I was just like, okay, all right, there's that. And God healed me of that. And to this day, I've never had any symptom of any kind of arthritis whatsoever in my body. And so very, very thankful to the Lord for that. No pain, no discomfort, which the memory of that pain that I had at that time was severe. And so I'm okay not to have any kind of arthritis in my body. So, one of the things that we can do when we have a health anxiety is that we'll wait too long before we even make the appointment. We'll go, okay, I don't want to make the appointment because what if? What if it is X, Y, or Z? What if it is cancer? What if I'm just going to go and I'm going to pray. I'm going to ask a whole bunch of other people to pray for me. We're going to pray. We're going to believe that God is going to heal whatever it is that's wrong with my body. Well, and there's nothing wrong with prayer. Absolutely. I think that God can do amazing things with our physical bodies. He heals us. He's healed me on many occasions. He's healed many other people that I know. But he did not heal my first husband. And I can honestly say I don't really understand why. All I know is that he did not. And so we're in a situation now where if you're in that place where you've had some tests done, or maybe you haven't yet, I encourage you to go, because the earlier the diagnosis, the more that they can do for your situation. So I do encourage you to do that. Maybe you have people in your family that you would call a hypochondriac, and people who go to the doctor about everything or nothing all of the time, and they're at the doctor several times a month, and they're just waiting for something to be wrong with them. They've done lots of tests, they've had lots of conversations with the doctor. Every time they go in, there's something else that's wrong. Maybe they've told you they've had this, that, or the other thing wrong with them numbers of times, only to find out that they don't. And you have this hypochondriac in your family who's like, oh yeah, I have this, I have that. All of the results that I have, they point toward this. And you're like, okay, but it's doesn't ever come out as anything. And so maybe you don't want to go to the doctor because of that, which is understandable. I get that. I have people in my family like that. And so you're just like, and so what that has done for me is I'm one of those people. We're just going to wait a little bit and just see what happens, because I don't want to be at the doctor all the time. And so I'm 62 and I go for my medical once a year. That's it. And any other tests that they want me to have, which now that I am 62 is getting to be a few more tests, right? There's an aneurysm that runs in my family. And so I'm going to have to get that test done about once every 5 years, just to make sure I don't have it. And if I do have it, can they do surgery on it? And so this is kind of where I'm at, right? But there's nothing wrong with me, right? I'm just doing the steps that my doctor is making me do to make sure that I remain healthy. And so those having that, but that kind of fear, that kind of anxiety that can come from people who struggle with that is real. And they are afraid. Like years ago, I knew a young gal who was like, I'm so aware of my body. I can tell when I'm getting a UTI before it even shows up when I do a test. And I'm like, that doesn't sound right. I'm like, then you're a little too attuned to your body. But I mean, she was right. But the problem is, it always took at least the one where she said, I have a UTI, and they do the testing. They go, no, you don't. And then we would have to go back 4 or 5 days later, do the test, and she did, right? So, it's one thing to be in tune with your body, but there's another thing to be inviting it in, and to be so in tune to your body that you are aware that something is off before it's even shown medically. And because they're not going to do anything for you until they have tests in hand that prove it. So these are just some of the areas, right, where we need to be watchful of, we need to be aware of with ourselves, and maybe even with other people, that our health anxiety decreases rather than increases, right? Fear of chronic illnesses is another area where people really struggle sometimes. Fear of getting, some kind of chronic illness that is going to change their lifestyle permanently. So maybe you have a chronic illness and you are afraid of a flare up. You're afraid that you're going to go through another time when it's just coming back and it's coming back worse, and you just dread the fact that that in these next couple of months, or maybe you're afraid that it's going to flare up, and then you're going to have to go through all these symptoms, and you don't want to do that. So you have all of this dread around understanding that, right? Like the flare up, you have a lot of dread and a lot of fear and anxiety around the flare up, right? Um, and then of course, there can always be the anxiety around complications, right? And anxiety around maybe possible death, right? The complications that can happen in any chronic illness, right? So it's being aware of where we stand with these things. And then, there's, the mental health issues that can come. We never want to look and go, well, we struggle with anxiety, and that can affect our mental health. It can bring depression. It can cause other things to, anxiety in itself actually is something that we need to have. We can have treated if we can't overcome it. It's something that we need to figure out how to treat. And that might mean medically, and it might mean some counsel. It might mean some of those things to be able to get over the anxiety that you have so that you can live a life that's productive and free from anxiety. So, maybe on the other hand, maybe you just live with somebody who has anxiety, medical anxiety, health anxieties, right? And maybe you feel the stress of that because you want to do things and their world continues to shrink and shrink and shrink. And so you're like, but I would like to go and do things. I would like to get out. I would like to do things. So, and you can't, or if you do, you have to do it alone. And that causes friction in the relationship. So do you allow your world to shrink as their world has shrunk? Or do you make a stand and go, no, I'm not going to be cheated out of life because of your fear? These are all things, right, that we need to maybe take a look at from time to time and go, what do I do with that? For those of you who are supporting people who have health anxieties, I think the best thing that you can do is to encourage them not to shrink their world. Like if they can go out and they can go for a walk, if they can go out and you can go someplace out for dinner once in a while, if you can, encourage them to broaden their scope of life, if you can encourage them to pray with you and to go after that and to be a support for them and help them to learn where that anxiety came from so that you can begin to break it off and begin to help them to walk into the fullness of what God has for them. These are all great places for you as a support person. You can be very, very, very supportive while you are being very, very, very encouraging to step outside of it, right? And each time they go out and they do something and there's success that can't be stolen, right? It's just that when they don't do it, they're left in the house. And so then success is stolen, right? And so it's just encouraging them to broaden. You might not get them on the plane. You might not get them, but you might get them to drive someplace where you can go for a holiday for a couple of days or a week or whatever. And, you will, as the progression of healing actually happens, you'll still need to allow for some things to happen, the extra cleaning, the sanitary practices, some of those things you might need to just say nothing about that while they heal, but encourage them to be able to just let their guard down a little bit every once in a while and see what happens, because God does want to set people free. So let's take a look at some tools here. Maybe you struggle with some of these things, or maybe other people that you know struggle with some of these things. So I want to say this, the number one thing, regardless of who you are, if it's you, I want you to stop right where you are when you realize that this is something you're struggling with. Stop if you find yourself triggered or spiraling out of control, right? Like sometimes you can see somebody and they are visibly sick and they come and they touch the can of corn that you were just going to pick up in Superstore. What do you do with that, right? If you find yourself triggered, stop for just a moment. And if you find that anxiety inside of you starting to spiral out of control, stop. Stop what you're doing and just take a breath and then pray and ask God to do something. So stop. Stop and try to rewind the time, rewind the clock so that you can go, okay, what can I do in this situation? What do I do? What's my next step? I'm going to cause, I'm not going to allow this anxiety to grab a hold of me. That's step number one, is stop when you find yourself triggered or when you find yourself spiraling out of control. The second thing I want you to do is I want you to try to determine what is pulling you into the anxiety. So, in other words, what's the real threat? What's pulling you into anxiety? Is it the fact that this person that you're looking at is visibly ill and they've touched the very thing that you want to touch? Do you just walk away and not get the corn? What do you do in that situation? What is it? What's the real threat? What is the real threat? Maybe the person doesn't have the flu. Maybe what they have is allergies, and so they're not actually going to make you sick. What can you do in that situation? What is your first step, right? So stop. What's the threat? Determine that. And then number three, because what this does in it helps you to break the runaway thinking. Because the thing about anxiety and fear is that you have this runaway thinking. It just goes in all these places that you don't want it to go. Your mind gets out of control. Your only thing you can think about is the possibilities of what could happen. And so you have to stop that. And so this helps you to break that runaway thinking. If you stop and think, what am I really concerned about here? What is the trigger? What exactly am I afraid of? What's the real threat? So that you can focus on a solution. Because the thing about anxiety is your mind is so controlled by the what if scenarios and the what if thinking that you do not take the time to stop and think about a solution. And so that's why number one is stop, take a breath, and think through a solution. What's a way that I can manage this, right? Because maybe there is a solution and maybe there's not a solution, but if there is one, you want to be able to find it. You don't want to have to leave your cart in Walmart while you come home because of something that triggered you. And now that thing is not going to be bought. The things that you need for dinner is not going to happen. So then what do you do, right? So you want to stop. You want to figure out what the real threat is so that you can pull it back and find a solution. So I hope that makes sense. And then 4, I want you to stop and ask God to help you to respond appropriately to the information that you do have, right? And so, we live in a time now, thank goodness, where cancer doesn't have to be a death sentence. There's lots of people who have cancer and they get treatment and they come through it and they're healthy and well again. So cancer doesn't have to be a death threat. And sometimes it's the fear of those things that we can't control, though, that cause us a lot of anxiety, right? So ask God, pray, and ask God to help you with your anxiety and to help you to deal with and to make sense of the information that you have. So it's going, okay, God, here I am. You know what's just going on here. You know that I wanted that can of corn and it's the only can of corn that's left on that shelf. Now, what am I going to do? Because that person looks like they're ill to me and I need a solution in this situation. So I'm asking you, Lord, to calm me down so that I can manage this day and manage this situation. I'm asking you to bring me your peace so that I can respond appropriately and respond in the way that you want me to respond. There's a lot of people who walk around who are high anxiety, high performance anxiety. And that just means they have a lot of anxiety, but they also know how to work so that people don't see that they have anxiety. Well, we just don't want the anxiety. So let's ask the Lord to come in and to help us. And then another thing is to give God all of your health concerns. If these are some of the things you struggle with, pray and just give them to Him and work on your faith and your trust in the fact that God can heal, in the fact that God does want to protect, that God can protect, that God can steer you away from all of these things. He created your body, right? Like He created you. He knows everything about you. These are things that are not too hard for Him to do. And there has been many people that have been healed as we've sought the Lord. So asking the Lord, giving Him your health concerns so that you don't need to be trapped by them and your world shrunk by it. And then on the practical level, if you find yourself triggered and spiraling out of control, stop and do some breathing exercises. Or, make an appointment and talk to a therapist, or go see a friend who might be able to help you with it because maybe they've struggled with it themselves. There are support groups for almost everything these days. That's going to help you as well. And so if you do struggle with this, know that you do not walk alone. There are many people who walk with you, and many people who have overcome it either through medical intervention, through counseling, through other assistance that they can have, through prayer, through deliverance. That God has done a mighty thing in a lot of people, and that there are other helps out there for you. So that wraps it up for today. I want to thank you so much for listening, and please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. I appreciate everything that everybody leaves and says, and every like that I get. You mean a lot to me. So be encouraged today as we move into 2026, and let's be determined to leave some of these things behind. We don't need to carry all of this stuff with us into the future, because God died for us, and he wants us to live free, happy, whole, and well in his sight. And so let's give him glory and honor today for what he is about to do in our lives in 2026.